But then mass production undermined their autonomy. Let's say something about mass production. So over time, especially as we move into the 20th century, and forms of industrial capitalism, as we, what we know as Fordism, workers are not just producers under Fordism. Workers are increasingly becoming consumers. Okay. What this means is that something like finance. Finance was so essential to backing colonial projects and backing the slave trade. In fact, Lloyd's of London, much of its capital and much of its business was actually insuring slave ships. But finance is very, very important. And early manufacturing enterprises also depended on finance. So by the time we get to the 20th century, financial institutions begin to extend credit to workers. And that enables them to consume more, and they can afford more, although their existing wages are not going up significantly. Under Fordism, as more and more commodities become available, cheaper than they were before, it's not just survival that's keeping them working, it is debt. Debt becomes a driver. In other words, we think so much before this moment of working as a way to just reproduce your labor power for the next day. Now it's about commodity, it's about accumulation, it's about having things, and debt keeps you continuing to work and work. And they pay that debt back with interest. Capitalists, on the other hand, can park their surplus in banks, and they can profit from financial ventures. So investments in stocks, in loans to workers and to businesses at high interest rates, credit cards come into being by the middle to late 20th century, prime and subprime mortgages, which we'll talk about in a second. And as we know from Peter Hudson's really great book, Bankers and Empire, which is out now, you should check it out, we know that, that colonial and racial regimes allowed US banks to use the Caribbean and to use sovereign debt as a way to invent new global financial instruments, to pry open new markets, and to accumulate huge sums of wealth while evading US regulatory regimes. And that's another way where racial capitalism is functioning. So immediately we begin to see how the system is racial. Race and gender and citizenship status determines wages, it determines employment opportunities, it determines the kind of labor you do, whether it's skilled, unskilled, unprotected, unpaid, paid, access to credit, to loans, to interest rates charged, that sort of thing. All this is shaped by value, racial value in some ways. So differential access is determined by race, gender, and class.